always hated with computer programming is like the computer just reads it like it is.
Well, that's where the saying "garbage in, garbage out" comes from.
Yeah.
So if you make a mistake, it will do it exactly as you put it in, mistake and all.
It's always annoying because it's like, oh, well, I know that has to be there, but of course the computer doesn't know.
No.
Because to hear the horror stories from our computer teachers about feeding the cards in the machine, the old stuff, and then you would hope you didn't drop one or make sure you had them all in the right order, because otherwise, error.
Yeah. Yeah,
Did you trip over a power cord once when there was a guy programming?
Yes, that was in, I think I was in grade 6 or 7, and there was this guy who was sort of known at my school as one of the, school tough guys / psychos, and not somebody to mess with. He was a nice enough guy if you stayed on his good side, but if you pissed him off, look out. So, at the time, all of us were using Commodore PET computers, which were, all-in-one units with the screen and the keyboard built in. And did they even have a disk drive or anything? I think they had a tape drive, or I can't even remember. I'm sure there was some way to save your stuff. Might have been floppy disks, like the actual big 5 1/4 inch floppy disks. But anyway, this particular guy was, pretty good at programming. He'd done some small games and stuff on the Commodore PET and on his own computer at home. And so he was working on this game, and I saw what he was doing, and he told me a bit about it. It was really cool. And I don't even remember what it was, some adventure game of some kind. So I was walking along, and I don't think there was a computer free at the time, so I was just kind of wandering around and checking out what he was doing, what other people were doing. And then there was the power cables for the computers. There was a power bar, and it was just like in the middle of the floor. So I was walking along and I tripped over the power bar, and there was like these sparks and smoke rising off all the keyboards, and it shorted out all the computers in the entire room. Like every single one of them went down. And all I thought was, oh no. Looked over at the resident psycho guy, and he was just like, ah! Furious, because I guess he hadn't saved or whatever, and he'd been working on that game for like a couple of hours at that point. But I don't know why he didn't save within a couple of hours, but there you go. And my first thought was, I must survive. So I ran away as fast as my little legs could carry me, ran out into the schoolyard, and realized I'd left my lunch behind. And I was, hungry. It was almost lunchtime. So this guy came out, and he said, "This is your lunch." Dropped it on the floor and smash! Ground it into the ground, and then turned around and walked away. I was just happy that he didn't do anything to me. He did give me quite the power wedgie at one point, though. I remember that.
I was going to say, I thought there was a wedgie in there.
Yeah, actually, maybe he did give me the wedgie that day, because that certainly would have been just cause for it. But,
So he gave you the wedgie and crunched your lunch?
He gave me, yeah, I think he did. I think he did well, I don't actually remember. I think that those may have been two separate incidents. But he gave me the wedgie, and he crunched my lunch. And then later on, interesting story, he had somehow got his hand on a prototype Atari 2600 game. I guess he actually had some contacts in the game industry.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a prototype video game for the Atari 2600. It was a James Bond game. And, by that point, we didn't really have any animosity between us or anything. We didn't really, it wasn't really an ongoing thing at all. And at that point, we were pretty cool with each other. And he asked if I wanted to borrow it or buy it. I think he was selling it for like $20 or something, which at the time was cheap for a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, I'm gonna have to ask my mom first because I don't really have the money and such. And so I asked her if I could get it, and I was all excited because it was rare. It's a prototype and stuff like that. And I was being given a rare opportunity to have this rare game. And my mom says, well, who wants to sell it to you? So I said, oh, so and so. And I guess she recognized the name because I told her about this guy before. And says, oh, is that the guy who like gave you the wedgie or pulled your underwear up? I said, yeah, a while ago. It's like, oh no, I don't want you having anything to do with him. So that was that. So some other lucky kid out there, I'm sure, got the game, and I got nothing. Yeah.
Like times do change after a while.
Well, yeah, people mellow out and stuff like that.
Lots of people I was enemies with. I mean, hell, Alex and I were bitter enemies at one point.
Were you?
And we became friends again, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was a little different though, because I mean, we'd been good friends for a while, and then we kind of split for a bit, and then we became even better friends afterwards.
Well, I wasn't really friends with the guy. It was more sort of like, there was no ill will, and we just kind of, were cool with each other after a couple of years.
Yeah. That was when he reprogrammed everything he lost that day.
Yeah. But I mean, that was the case with a lot of kids that I knew, and, who were bitter enemies in grade 6, and by grade 8 we were, had no problem with each other. And then there were others that, ended up having even more problems with later when we ended up in the same high school together, but that's, another story for another time. But, him in particular, wasn't a big deal. Oh well. On the plus side, I think that 007 game was eventually released, and I'm pretty sure I do have it in one of my Atari collections somewhere, in some form.
Prototype E.T. game.
God, why did I pay money for this? Do I even have E.T.? I don't think I have it. I've played it before. Like, I played E.T. when it was new. I was just like, cool, an E.T. game. And
You just have to go out into the desert to find one now.
pretty much. Actually, no, I think they're still pretty widely available because nobody wants them. It's one of the few sort of classic games you can get really cheap now.
Well, I think if anything, probably people want it just to see how bad it really is.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And then once you've seen that, then you just hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was the worst game ever. I just didn't think it was particularly interesting. It was a boring game, really, is what it boils down to.
Well, and then if you played all the way through, there's some glitch where E2 would basically just fall into this invisible hole, and then that was it. You had to reboot the game.
Oh, really?
Start right back from the beginning.
Oh, great. Yeah, I didn't play very much of it. I never owned it. It was at a friend's place, so I played it a little bit.